Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with zucchini roll lasagna. That's right, I've stopped telling people my favorite lasagna doesn't contain any pasta, since who would believe such a thing? But I am very sure that if you make this, you are also going to be not telling people the exact same thing. All right, low carb or not, this really is an incredible lasagna. And to get started, we will mix up a 3 cheese filling, which of course will include some ricotta, some mozzarella, as well as some Parmesan cheese. And please do me a favor and use the real stuff, Parmigiano Reggiano. And then to our cheeses we will add some salt, plus some freshly ground black pepper, and of course a few shakes of cayenne just to stay in shape. And then I also like to toss in a little bit of freshly chopped Italian parsley, and not just for looks. Okay, that adds a little bit of herbaceous bitterness, which brings out the sweetness in the cheeses. And that's it, we'll finish this up with 1 large egg, at which point we'll take a spoon and give this a mix. And obviously, if you like adding things like spinach or Swiss chard to your cheese filling for lasagna, that would also work fine for this. I mean, you are after all the mama of your zucchini roll lasagna, so you go ahead and add whatever you want to this. And then what we'll do once that is mixed is pop it in the fridge and keep it cold until we need it. And we will move on to the optional meat sauce, which for me is going to start by browning some turkey Italian sausage, along with some diced onions and a big pinch of salt in some olive oil. And we'll do that over medium-high heat. And the first phase for this will be to break up the meat into small crumbles. Unless you don't want small crumbles, in which case break them up into whatever size crumbles you want. But no matter what size that is, we'll try to get them nice and consistent and uniform, so that our sauce has a nice even texture when it's done. All right, so this is phase 1. And once our mixture is looking something like this, we'll move to phase 2, which is to get a little bit of browning on the meat. And also our pieces of onion are going to soften and sweeten and start turning golden. And we really don't need a severe browning here, but I do recommend you get at least this much color. And once we're happy with how that looks, we will add a jar of prepared marinara sauce, or of course about 3 cups of homemade sauce. But if we do use a jar, as usual, we will rinse that out with about a half a cup of water and pour that in as well. And then for a little extra richness and extra fat, since that turkey sausage is kind of lean, we will also add a nice splash of cream. And what we'll do is stir all that together, and we'll wait for this to come back to a simmer, and then reduce our heat down to medium-low, and simply cook this stirring occasionally for about 10 minutes, at which point it should be ready to use. And yes, you definitely could cook it longer if you want, but we don't want it getting too thick and dry, so if you do decide to simmer it longer, make sure you add a splash of water, so that you maintain a texture something similar to this. And that's it. Once we decide our sauce is looking and tasting good, we will transfer it into the bottom of a 9x13 casserole dish. And once we have that all spread out nice and evenly, we will just set it aside. And we can move on to prep our zucchini, which we will start by trimming off the ends. And then to make some nice thin uniform strips, we will take our sharpest, widest vegetable peeler, and we will start peeling this lengthwise. And of course, the first 3 or 4 slices aren't going to be big enough. But once we get towards the center, we are hopefully going to get some nice large usable pieces. And since we might only get like 4 or 5 usable pieces per zucchini, we probably want to have at least 6 or 7 squash on hand. Although you can, if you want, put 2 smaller pieces together and try to roll it that way. But it is nicer if you have just one nice long piece. And that's it. Once our zucchini is cut, we will transfer that into a bowl, and we will sprinkle over what looks like a ridiculous amount of salt. But don't worry. After we give this a thorough mix, and we let it sit for about 5 minutes, we are going to rinse this off very, very thoroughly with lots of cold water. And most of this salt's going to get washed away. And I cannot stress enough the importance of this step. All right, the salt is going to draw out liquid and bitterness and make our zucchini taste much better. And it's also going to help this keep a beautiful texture. So after tossing, we'll let that sit for exactly 5 minutes. And you'll notice the zucchini gets very limp, but it doesn't get soft. In fact, the salt actually kind of firms up the bite. But anyway, like I said, after 5 minutes, we will rinse that very, very well using lots of cold water, at which point we will let this drain thoroughly. And our salt-cured zucchini strips are now ready to fill. And to do that, we will lay those down on a cutting board, and we will take our cold cheese mixture and spread about 2 rounded teaspoons onto each one. And yes, I guess you could transfer this into a piping bag, which might be quicker. and that's probably how we do it in the restaurant. But I just went with the spoon, and it didn't really take that long. And once we have those filled, as the recipe name might indicate, we're going to roll them up. And as I was doing this first one, I realized it was actually 2 pieces of zucchini. But I knew I had a few extra pieces, so I didn't bother unrolling it. And actually, if you have enough zucchini, you could probably double this up. But having said that, all the rest that just had one worked out perfectly. So I guess what I'm saying is you're fine either way. And then once those are rolled up, we will transfer those on top of what I really want to call a turkey bolognese. Oh, and let me show you a great trick here. If you happen to have a few tablespoons of the filling left over, what you can do is put little dollops on top of the sauce like this. And then you take any of your zucchini rolls that might look a little bit smaller, and you place those on top. And that's a perfect way to use up all our filling without messing up our presentation. Of course, the other way to use up all the filling would be to lay down all 30 pieces of zucchini on the table and then fill them all at once before you roll. But anyway, as long as we use it all up, it doesn't matter. And then once all 30 portions are placed in, we'll go ahead and apply a little more Parmesan to the top, which I think could also be pecorino. That seems to always pair beautifully with any kind of vegetable preparations. And then we'll follow that with a relatively light scattering of shredded mozzarella. And once the top's been cheesed, for a final touch, I like to drizzle over a little bit of olive oil. And yes, I'm loving the fact that you can now get really good olive oil in squeeze bottles, since a squeeze bottle is a chef's best friend. Well, one of our best friends. And that's it. This is now ready to transfer into the center of a 400-degree oven for about 45 minutes to an hour, or until everything's hot and bubbling and the cheese on the top has started to brown. And it hopefully looks like this. Okay, it's not like regular lasagna is ugly, but come on, look at that. That is like next level enticing. And we could serve immediately, but it is probably a good idea if we let these rest for about 5 to 10 minutes. And while that's happening, I do like to clean up the edges of the dish a little bit, which is very easy to do with a barely damp towel while it's still hot. What's also very easy to do is to burn yourself. So make sure you fold up a couple towels and don't press too hard. And that's it once I had that tidied up. And I took a few contractually obligated pictures. I grabbed a spoon and served a couple up. And we'll want to make sure we get some of that turkey bolognese from the bottom. And then I grabbed a fork and dug in. And since this is very low carb, I decided to grab a piece of bread to help move things around. And that, my friends, really truly is an extraordinary bite of lasagna. Okay, all those same familiar flavors are there, but they're actually coming through in a cleaner, less starchy way. And I think the greatest compliment we can give this is that you can enjoy an entire serving and not once think to yourself, hey, wait, there's no pasta in this. Okay, that will not even cross your mind. And if you're not into the quick and easy turkey bolognese we made, you can just use some good old plain marinara in the bottom. Or really any tomato sauce. And I think even a white cream sauce would work here. Okay, so knowing this recipe is a good thing, but understanding the technique and all the possibilities it could produce, that is by far the most important thing. But whether you do an alternative version or make this exactly as shown, I think it's a must-make for every lasagna lover. And I really do hope you give it a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.